Hello to the two people who regularly watch my videos. Yes, it's been a while. I've just been busy, being tricked by further maths into thinking this might be a fun final year of school. Anyway, in the midst of failing my tests, I had a moment to think, a moment to ponder on what's really important. Should I even post videos anymore? What am I doing this all for? I said I'd make a video about 13 reasons why I'm Jane the Virgin, but why must I waste my time writing out an essay to tell people what they already know? 13 reasons why it was a bad show. Everyone knows that. And no one really talks about Jane the Virgin anymore, because it ended so badly. My essay is not needed here. This is how I felt until I spoke to one of my housemates, and she said that it had one of the most beautiful and romantic endings, and continued to fight me when all I told her were facts. I thought I was done, but when humanity needs a hero, I can't turn a blind eye. Jane the Virgin was a mess, and it's up to me to convince as many people as I can. So I've been writing this essay for a while, and my original idea was to go season by season writing down Raphael's transgressions, as I believed he was the main reason why the show was ruined, and that's still the case. But there's so much more from seasons 3 to 5 that ruined the show. Everything I didn't like from season 1 and 2 ultimately came down to Raphael and all his flaws and toxicity. I feel that I just have so many emotions surrounding Raphael, so I'm gonna talk about the minor details that bothered me first. I don't really want to get into this point because it might spark some controversy, so all I'll say is this. Imagine a Muslim character in a series, very religious and strict in their traditions and faith. One day she says, I'm hungry. So her granddaughter takes her to a butchery and orders pork. The grandma is like, no, we don't eat pork. But the granddaughter says, no, it'll taste good. It'll make you happy. So grandma says nothing else, goes home and has some pork ribs and continues to eat pork when she feels like it. I'm not saying it's impossible to have a character move away from their religious faith, but I just feel that it has to be written with some delicacy. It can't be one episode that character's religious and the next they're not. And it also can't be written in a way that suggests that this religious faith is one that should be abandoned. That's all I'll say about that. I was really annoyed when Zoe celebrated when Rogelio found out that his female co-star was getting paid more. I know it's not that deep when it gets resolved in the end, but the fact that it was even a subplot is kind of annoying. On the topic of Rogelio's work, I really didn't like the fact that he had to move away. Not only because no one called River out on how unfair it was to move production across the country, but also because I thought that Rogelio's character was supposed to end up choosing his family over his career as part of his arc. The fact that he had to move away introduced no new conflict if you think about it. Xiomara easily found a place to work, and his baby's mother and her husband were completely on board with it. Okay, I understand the challenge of having characters end up together before the series ends. Sometimes the build up to characters ending up together is much more interesting than the relationship itself. Usually the writers will throw in drama and challenges so that the audience doesn't get bored. Did I get bored watching Petra and JR's relationship? I can't say because I didn't watch their relationship. They were hardly ever together. They break up because Petra killed Aneshka and got JR fired. Then they got back together because JR forgave her. Then she realized that she wasn't actually over it and broke up with Petra again. Then they got back together, but then JR gets a job somewhere else and thinks this is the best time to have a fresh start and breaks up with Petra again, but then she shows up at the wedding, and you know what? I didn't get bored watching that. I got whiplash. Also, JR's name being Jane added nothing to the show, and I wish they'd just given her a real name because I hate saying JR. So while I was waiting for season 5, I spent an afternoon writing notes on why Michael came back and who JR shot. Magda was my number one suspect for the blackmailer, but someone had pointed out that she couldn't have held that gun because she had a hook for that hand, so I thought it would have been Aneshka. I know this doesn't seem like a good idea since Aneshka had already faked her death once before, and this time the narrator did say that she was dead. But honestly, I can't think of anyone else for this to make sense. If they had Aneshka be killed in a more survivable way and didn't do the whole fake funeral thing, then Aneshka should have been the blackmailer. The blackmailer would have to have had a strong hatred for Petra and want to see her suffer, and also would have had to be 100% sure that Petra killed Aneshka, because if the reveal was going to be something stupid and nonsensical, at least let it be the reveal that had the most logic with it. It was Milos. Milos. The reason why this bothers me is that it was such a letdown. When they suspect the blackmailer is Milos, they call the prison he's supposed to be at and they say he's there. I understand the audience shouldn't figure out the twist, but I just found it lazy to say he's there so we don't suspect him, then just throw him as a twist without much explanation. Also, how did Milos even know Petra Kolonushka? Did he escape prison just to blackmail her, or had he just been out for a while and was just aimlessly wandering around? And how did he even manage to leave his country as a fugitive, and what was his plan after Petra was in prison? Okay, most of this was just nitpicking, and now we're going to get into the main issues with the show. One thing I found to be a prominent problem with Raphael as a character in season 1 is the fact that there's little to no sign that he respects the institution of marriage. One of the first things we learn about Raphael is that he's a trapped husband, and later on we hear him admit to his sister that he wants a divorce, and his wife at the time, Petra, overhears this, causing her to use Raphael's sample and have a doctor inseminate herself. While Petra was manipulative in the first season, I think after hearing her backstory, things started to make a lot more sense, and honestly I began to sympathize with her. In her backstory, she actually ends up in a happy and loving relationship with Lachlan, which is unexpected for her since she probably thought she was going to have to end up as a trophy wife in order to secure a better life for her and her mother. However, on the same day that she ends up engaged to Lachlan, he gets promoted by Emilio Solano. Why does that name matter? Because he's Raphael's father. Emilio gives the promotion to Lachlan, an actually hardworking man, and not to his son, a spoiled, womanizing drunk. And I can already hear what you're saying. That was before he had cancer, he's changed now. That's not true, and I'll explain why in a bit. So because Raphael feels that he's undeserving of such disrespect, he decides to take his anger out on Lachlan and begins to put the moves on Petra. Petra eventually falls for Raphael, and even though the show doesn't explain it that well, I think Raphael fell for her too. I feel so because after Petra ends it with Lachlan and she and Raphael get married, we're given a flashback to the time before all the, as Petra called it, bad luck, when she and Raphael were expecting a baby. And in the flashback, we see what looks like genuine happiness and love in the relationship. This is why I can't understand Raphael's actions in the present day. He stole Petra from her fiancé, he asked her to marry him. Petra stood by him through his cancer treatment. Yes, she had an affair during that time, but even she says this. And regardless of the affair, Raphael still wants the divorce. He mentions divorce in the first episode within the first half. He finds out about the affair in the third episode, which, by the way, wasn't an actual confirmation that his wife was cheating. Just saying. And why did he want the divorce before? Why doesn't he want to acknowledge the fact that Petra is trying to save the marriage? Yes, Petra does want money, but she also still has feelings for her husband. But you know, that's in the past, right? He's changed now. He won't make the same mistakes again. He had cancer. But wait, Jane and Michael were engaged. Yes, the relationship before the breakup wasn't amazing, but that is not the point of this argument. The point is, regardless of Jane's conflicted feelings, the two of them were engaged. Then Raphael comes along and begins to obviously flirt with Jane, despite the fact that he knows she's in a committed relationship with Michael. Now the question is, what's the difference between being friendly and flirting? To answer this, we need to... Did he just touch her leg? I'm sorry. Say what you will, but no. You cannot try and justify this as friendly behavior. So many times before Jane and Michael break up, there are moments of unnecessary physical contact. For example, this scene where Jane comically falls into the swimming pool. Raphael, being the hero that he is, jumps in to save her.
Oh God! Jane, are you okay?
I'm fine. It's 4 feet, Baywatch.
Sorry, I didn't know if you could swim.
Do you know I can stand? Right.
You look like Cousin It.
Thanks.
Jane?
The laughing is not the crime here, but why does Raphael reach for her hair? I don't understand what logical conclusion could be reached other than the fact that Raphael knows what he's doing. In episode 3, he asks Jane to dance, and she turns him down, because, you know, she's engaged to someone else. But he still insists and does not take no for an answer. And by the way, all splitting happens when Raphael has decided to give his marriage with Petra a second chance, before he found out about the affair and what he knows Jane and Michael are about to be married. And the irony presents itself in the very next episode, when Raphael finds out that Petra was having an affair with Roman Zazo, and immediately asks for divorce. But it's not like Raphael was straying away from the path of infidelity. And even when he's not with Petra anymore, Jane is still with Michael. So when he goes in for a hug or uses the word sexy with her, he's maliciously leading Jane on, and he shouldn't even try to make it seem like it's anything otherwise. He is doing to Michael and Jane what he previously did to Petra and Lachlan. And in episode 6, after Jane and Michael had their fight about Michael not telling Jane about the affair, Raphael and Jane start talking on the bench. Firstly, Jane is having issues at the school that she's teaching at, and now her stepsisters are being mean to her. She says she felt like she was back at high school.
Well, I was different in high school. Kind of quiet and shy, and you wouldn't have noticed me.
Of course I would have noticed you.
Really, Raphael? You would have noticed her. Have you forgotten the fact that you completely forgot about her the first time you met? So now Raphael says this.
Can't believe Michael didn't tell you about the arrest.
First off, how rude is it to point out problems in someone else's relationship? What do you hope to gain, Raphael? Secondly, this hypocrisy will come back in future seasons when Jane questions Raphael's relationships and he tells her to mind her own business and stop judging him. So Jane tells Raphael that she's having some issues with Michael. Raphael doesn't ask why, he doesn't even apologize, but instead he tells Jane he has feelings for her, just to complicate matters even more. And how does this confession go?
There's just so much to consider.
And there it was again. An opening.
Yeah. Including the fact that I have feelings for you.
What?
Look, changed. I've never felt this type of connection with anyone in my entire life. And we're having a baby, you know? Look, Jane, this is crazy, I know, but I've never been the type of guy that believes in fate or destiny. What are the chances? Huh? I mean, we kissed 5 years ago, and now we're here? I mean, it sounds crazy, but doesn't this just all kind of feel meant to be?
He uses words like family, destiny, and fate, knowing that this will resonate with Jane. So that night, Jane breaks up with Michael, and one of the reasons for this is that he kept the affair a secret. However, Raphael does not tell Jane that he's divorcing Petra because he knows that she won't give him the baby. And the other reason why he does not tell Jane about the divorce is because he knows he does not have a reason to. When he finally gets a reason, the affair, he tells Jane immediately. So when Raphael finds out about Petra's true identity, he forces her to sign the divorce papers and leave the hotel. She agrees, but Raphael refuses to give her what she deserves in the prenup that had already been signed, saying this.
The divorce papers. I signed them. You won. And I'll leave as soon as you pay up my prenup.
Ah, yes, her prenup. Petra's golden ticket.
Here's the thing about the prenup. Petra and Del signed it. You're not Petra and Del.
Raphael, please. I have nothing.
And you deserve nothing.
Yes, I know, you're right. Let me at least tell you the truth about everything. I lied about my identity because I've been running for a very long time from a very evil man.
Yeah. So here's the problem. I don't believe you.
I can't understand why Raphael is being so cruel. Yes, Petra lied about her identity, but she did to survive. And she literally has no money because she fled her country. Just give her the money. Your excuse is bull. Stop being so mean, petty, and childish. So after all this, some episodes go by, but Raphael's attitude towards Petra is honestly quite inconsistent. In episode 12, he says that she's crazy, but in episode 16, he's all buddy-buddy with her. Then in episode 22, he's devising a plan to buy Petra out of the hotel that involves him toying with her feelings because he knows full well that she's still in love with him. As soon as Raphael is informed that Petra still likes him, he uses that to his advantage and manipulates Petra into getting what he wants. It was justifiable when he was trying to get her to have Magda leave the hotel, but in the final episode when he's purposefully and intentionally toying with Petra, it's just downright evil. Someone must please explain to me why there's tension between Michael and Raphael before Jane meets Michael. On Michael's side, I understand the jealousy. I don't condone it. I understand it. Actually, never mind, I do condone it. Look at Raphael with Jane. Ugh. But I never understood why it was the other way around. And even after Jane meets Michael, why is Raphael so pissed? Bro, calm it. Michael isn't as low as you. He wouldn't just steal your girl. Much of what I want to say about Raphael and Michael is best to be covered in my final point, but I do want to include this one scene. For some context, it's in the final episode of season 1 when Michael brings a burger to Jane because she had to cancel dinner. Pushy, I get it, but it was also quite thoughtful, and he wasn't expecting to get much out of it. I mean, at least he didn't kiss her as soon as she broke up with Raphael. Anyway, Jane has contractions which weren't real contractions, but I can't be bothered to say what the name of those kind of contractions are. At the hospital, Michael is waiting to give Jane a lift home.
Michael. It was false labor. Jane's just changing now, so you can go. I'll give her a ride home.
Oh, I'll just wait to say goodbye.
I'll tell you said goodbye. You can go.
That's okay, I'll wait.
Of course you will. Because you're always just here, waiting, aren't you? Hoping that she comes running back to you, right?
Would you like to know my strategy, Jess?
Is the art of seduction really where you shine?
Be there.
That's it.
Yeah. Just be there. No matter where he goes, be there. He gets a drink, be there. He talks to his friends, be there. At the end of the night, be there. It's called the Joe Biden.
But why is Raphael so pissed? Why are you so upset that Michael's hanging out with Jane? At least she's single. Okay, one last thing that really ticked me off overall is when Rogelio gets mad at Raphael for not asking him before he proposed to Jane. What does he say?
No. Let me understand. You have not called me here to apologize? Do I have that right?
For what?
Let me spell it out to you without actually spelling anything, you know? You have no trouble asking me for a meeting with a superstar. But when it comes to my most prized possession, whose hand you want in marriage.
Wait, you're mad that I didn't ask you before I proposed to Jane?
Finally, you understand.
I'm sorry. Honestly, it didn't even occur to me, really, because, you know, I've known her longer than you.
I don't think I even need to continue at this point. I will. But if you're not convinced, then you're hip deep in denial. What brings my blood to a boil about Raphael is that in the first and second season, for the most part, when I felt, this guy is kind of a jerk, it was intentional. But in season 4 and 5, he's a jerk, and the writers tried to convince me that he's in the right. I really love the story in the first 2 seasons because of how the tropes associated with telenovelas are flipped on their head. You have the significant other in the beginning who the protagonist will eventually leave and pursue a relationship with the main love interest who is more conventionally attractive, romantic and passionate, but also has a dark side, setting up for the typical dynamic of the pure-hearted girl having to fix her love interest who is damaged inside, as seen in the kissing booth, after, and probably more. There's also the ex of the main love interest who schemes and manipulates to get him back. What I found very interesting in season 1 is how well these tropes are deconstructed. Petra has an interesting backstory, and at some point she moved on from Raphael and focused on her career, choosing not to sabotage Jane. And Jane and Raphael's relationship is one that I found to be oddly realistic. Despite all the drama and chaos, the relationship itself had a realistic downfall. There was a lack of communication in the relationship and some dishonesty and insecurity, and instead of the narrator or the characters in the show saying that these problems are toxic and are going to destroy the relationship, the series simply shows us how all of this affects their relationship and eventually leads to their breakup, rather than telling us, which I find more effective. With all this said, let's discuss Jane and Raphael's relationship from season 1. So before Jane and Raphael got together, there were some moments where I felt that he was being really annoying. First of all, I know Raphael apologized for this, but I still must bring it up. He assumes Jane is a stripper.
You look familiar.
Really? Not sure.
No, I really think we've met.
I don't usually wear clamshells.
Oh, the strip club on Biscayne.
Jerk.
Like, what has to be going through your head as you say this? First of all, mistaking someone for a stripper makes the person feel humiliated and makes you look like an ass. If she says she is said stripper, then great, I guess. But if in the more likely event she isn't the stripper, then she's now mad. Clearly.
Jerk.
Gosh, I'm getting so worked up about this that I haven't even addressed anything else. In episode 4, Jane has a not safe for work dream about Raphael. She tells Michael this in front of a priest and Michael isn't too happy. So she writes Michael a not so safe for work letter and also writes something for Raphael who's still flirting.
On the fantasy of it, you know? Really try to make it sexy.
Now I'm going to excuse Jane's actions in this season because pregnancy. However, Raphael's not getting off the hook so easily. So in the typical rom-com scenario, Jane accidentally swaps the letters, and this is where I started to frown. The letter isn't addressed to anyone. However, despite the very seductive and romantic tone, Raphael arrogantly assumes the letter was written for him and not, Jane's fiancé. Then Jane comes in, she's in a panic, but Raphael won't let her speak. He explicitly states that he does not have feelings for Jane when he thinks she has feelings for him. Then as soon as Jane tells him the logical explanation that the message was meant for Michael, Raphael starts to get feelings for Jane. Rewatching this season, it's clear that Raphael was in love with the idea of family rather than Raphael Solano. If there wasn't a baby involved but Jane and Raphael still reconnected, I don't think the relationship would have lasted that long. Jane meets her father for the first time around the same time she gets with Raphael. This is interesting because she feels that she's lost so much of herself because she didn't know her father. She dreams of a life she could have had if she had known her family. She wants a baby to grow up in a functional family, and the last thing she wants is to be a single mother, to end up in the same position her mother was in after she spent her whole life trying to make sure she didn't end up like her mother. If I'm being honest, I do understand where Jane is coming from. However, I still find it problematic. There are situations where two teenagers, or just young people in general, fall in love and have a baby, and their parents tell them to marry for the child's sake. In some cases, this works out because the parents still loved each other before the baby came along. However, in some unfortunate cases, the parents don't actually want to spend the rest of their lives together. But it doesn't mean that all hope is lost if they know how to be sensible and have the child's best interest in mind. While single mothers don't always choose to have it that way, they still can be good mothers. And even though parents separate, they can still work through things together to ensure that the baby has a good life and doesn't feel that they were a burden or a mistake. In Jane and Raphael's case, Jane believes that her life did not run smoothly because she didn't come from a nuclear family. While it is true that this kind of family is desirable, it doesn't mean that anyone's life will automatically be better or worse if their family was different. Jane grew up with her mother and her grandmother. She got a good education and she grew up in a house of love. I just don't understand why she had to compromise a chance at a happy life with Michael rather than just reaching a custody agreement with Raphael. Yes, to have your parents together is nice, but wouldn't it be better to have your parents happy with someone that they love? And having your parents together when there isn't any love would also be upsetting because they're gonna fight and probably split up further down the line, which, incidentally, is what happens more than once with Jane and Raphael. This is the only scene where we can see Jane and Raphael genuinely talking. Also, on a proper side note, does Raphael's story remind you of something? He goes from talking about being attacked by dogs to his mother leaving him.
Meanwhile, Jane and Raphael would remember every moment of this night.
Ducks.
Yes.
You're scared of ducks.
I am. Look, I was 9 years old.
Uh-huh.
And there was an incident. I ran out of bread and then they all attacked me.
Why'd your mom leave?
I don't know, to be honest. I was 4. And I woke up the morning after my birthday and she was gone.
Is it just me? Okay, right. Alright, so I had a lot more to say about Raphael from season 1, but I don't really have the time to compile all those notes into an essay, so I'm just going to put them up here while I talk about all the other things about Raphael that won't be included in part C. I know the show is probably cancelled and that's why the subplot of Raphael being adopted ends so anticlimactically. Hi, so I just found out that the show wasn't cancelled. Apparently after season 3 the writers planned out the series to end in season 5. So can someone please make sense of this for me? Anyway, while we're here, I just want to address a small argument that people keep telling me when I complain about the series. They say the show makes fun of telenovelas and that's why the twists are so ridiculous. And I know this is the case, but in the first 2 seasons, while there were dramatic reveals, obviously being satirical of telenovelas like evil twins and twist villains, there was still logic and thought put into these reveals. And even though it made fun of telenovelas, it was still a telenovela, and a telenovela wouldn't introduce drama only to resolve it in a cheap and boring way. But just because something has a reason for being disappointing, doesn't mean that it's no longer disappointing. Personally, regardless of the show's cancellation, I don't think they should have added more drama surrounding Raphael's parents. I know Emilio wasn't a saint, but he also wasn't so dumb as to adopt his son, let him run his hotel only to leave it to his alcoholic daughter who didn't even work at the hotel. Why would he include that addendum about biological children? That is the pettiest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And there's already been enough plot twists surrounding Raphael's parents. First, we're told his mother left, then she's neuter, then he's adopted, then he finds his birth parents, but they're dead. And it's the same with Luisa when she suspects her mother is alive because it was a closed casket funeral. So it turns out she wasn't in that coffin, so she finally finds her real mother, but oh, she died. Guys, come on. Let's be creative, not dumb. Let plot twists affect the plot. Anushka being Petra's turn came out of nowhere, yes, but at least it was an explanation that made some sense, and at least Anushka did something after that. Imagine if after this scene, Anushka gets shot. Or better yet, imagine if Magda tells Petra she has a twin sister, Petra looks for her, and finds out that she's dead. That's what these "maybe my parents are alive" twists feel like. Wanting that shock, but not wanting to commit creatively and add in a new character. And lastly, I don't feel like mentioning a lot from season 3 and 4 in terms of Jane and Raphael's relationship, just because nothing really stood out to me as much as they do in season 5. The only thing I found particularly outrageous was this fight.
Everything?
Yes! You knew I didn't want Mateo to go to that school next year. You know I don't like those people.
You mean people like me?
I mean people who care only about money, who look down on you if you don't have it.
Oh my God! I am done feeling guilty because I don't want Mateo to have some small life where he counts pennies and doesn't get on a plane till he's 20 years old.
I honestly and truly struggle to remember when he apologized for saying that. Also, I really hate the fact that the term Raphael Virgin was ever used in the show. And does anyone else find it weird that Jane and Raphael's relationship only works when Jane stops waiting for marriage? Okay, let's talk about Michael. Okay, so I know to some people out there I seem like a crazy person who couldn't accept the ending of this series, but that's not true. This could have been avoided. When Michael got shot at the end of season 2, I immediately searched on Google to see if he would die, and I found that he would survive the shot only to be killed off later in season 3, so I stopped watching. Michael had become my favorite character after I got out my Team Raphael face in season 1, so I wasn't too pleased to learn that my favorite character would be killed off like that. And I just knew that with Michael gone, Jane and Raphael were going to end up together, which was also going to piss me off. Also, I don't love it when a character has to go through the loss of their significant other, sibling, or child. So I told myself, Jane the Virgin ended in season 2 when Jane and Michael got married. No matter how curious you are about what might happen, don't put yourself through all that. And so I didn't. And that was fine. Until a few years later, when I saw this.
Rose didn't tell me about my parents.
Okay. What did she tell you?
Surprise!
I knew that Jane and Michael weren't guaranteed to end up together just for this, but having Michael back in the show, even if he wasn't with Jane, was enough for me to start watching again. So I skipped over the beginning of season 3 to watch from the point after Michael died, and watched until the end of season 4, then I got tired of waiting for season 5, so I went back and watched season 3. And I cried. So hard. My tears are on this show's hand, and I don't take that lightly. Jane and Michael were married. We won. You don't kill off the husband like that. Our ship sailed and made it safe to the harbor. You can't bomb our ship when you have given us a false sense of security. That is against the rules. And I know other shows and movies don't really do this that often because losing a significant other is such a terrible thing to go through, and imagine having to write in that grief. Imagine the burden of having to write a widow struggling through that grief. How did the writers handle it, you ask? They didn't. You know, the sections before, you can argue with me all you want, and I probably made some mistakes myself. But section C is the truth, and if you can't handle the truth, then don't try to argue with me because it won't go well for you. Anyway, Michael coming back brings up so many issues, even regardless of his relationship with Jane. Alright, Rose, what's happening? Why are you still part of the show? Why do you do the things that you do? Let's go back to the notes I wrote about the season 4 finale. The only thing I could conclude for sure about Michael coming back is that it couldn't have been Sinostra's doing because that wouldn't make any sense since Michael wasn't even working on the case. Oh wait, no. Apparently he was working on the case and was simply lying to his wife because that makes sense. So just listen to Rose's explanation for why she erased Michael's memories.
Tell me why you did it. For us. You and I had just gotten back into town after our submarine tour. I had my Eileen face on, and I ran into Michael. And my phone fell. As we both bent down to pick it up, my mask came unglued. Just a little. I didn't know if he saw, but he and I were going to be formally introduced later that week, and when he saw me with you, he could have put 2 and 2 together.
2 things. Firstly, how drastic was this reaction? If she thought he was onto her, why didn't she just change her identity again? And why did she only erase his memories without questioning him before that? Maybe he told someone else between his trip to the coffee shop and his exam. And how did the whole thing even work? No, really, how? What resources does Rose have that could make Michael collapse in the middle of the exam and be taken to a doctor who would lie to his family and sign a fake birth certificate? And what do they do about the body? Oh, these aren't rhetorical questions. Please can someone explain this to me in the comments section. I won't argue with you. I'll just laugh because whatever explanation could possibly justify this would just be hilarious. And my second issue is why does Sinostra even erase his memories instead of, I don't know, killing him like she tried to before? Michael had figured out Rose's identity before. Wait, no, he hadn't, actually. At the end of season 2, he suspects Susanna of something, but doesn't immediately think that it's Sinostra. But Rose knows that suspicion and is enough for her to shoot him. Come to think of it, did he ever even realize that Susanna was Rose? All this was to say that it doesn't make any sense for Rose to fake Michael's death and erase his memories instead of just killing him. And for those thinking, well, she obviously did it so she could have something to leverage with Jane or Raphael. Thank you for helping me segue into my next point. Rose is a terrible villain. I loved her as a villain in the first 2 seasons because of how well she was written. She's deceitful, cunning, and a murderer, but she isn't actually mean. She was never really out to get Jane. She wouldn't target Jane just for the sake of it. She and Jane don't have a connection. Some minor criticism I've heard about Mulan is that unlike other Disney princesses, the villain has no personal connection to the protagonist. I agree that it is compelling to have a villain whose actions are tied to our main character. However, I prefer a good villain who isn't directly tied to the protagonist, to Sinostra after season 2. I also think that the villain needs to be connected to the protagonist in a way that makes sense in the story. It doesn't make any sense for Jane, a teacher/writer, to have a nemesis who's a drug lord and is out to get her. This is why Michael's character was more than just another vertex in the love triangle of season 1. He was a cop. He was a way to introduce all this crime drama into the show, and it worked. Jane and Rose are only connected by proxy because of Michael. But after Michael is killed off, there's no longer a link between Jane and Rose, and I'm mad that the show tries to suggest that there is. I think it was interesting to see Jane's trauma and panic surrounding Rose because Rose kidnapped Mateo and is the reason for Michael's death. But now that I think about it, Jane and Rose don't actually interact that much, if at all, after Jane knows Rose is Sinestro. So why does this happen?
What's wrong? Cat got your tongue? Or villain got your cat?
Rose is just so messy. Where's the cunningness? Where's the subtlety? Where's the meticulous planning that went into every scheme this character ever came up with? If she escaped prison, why isn't she changing her identity or something? Or getting on with her drug lord work? Yes, she wants to abuse Luisa, but her entire world does not only revolve around her. The times when Rose has been backed into a corner in previous seasons, she faked her death or went off the grid and came back with a new identity and a new plan. Now I don't even know. I really just don't understand what she's supposed to be. They've ruined this character. Last thing. In this scene, I was willing to give the series a shred of praise for actually using Michael's return, even if he would be doing the bare minimum. But then we got this.
You're under arrest.
Who is she? And while we're on the topic of Michael not doing anything, there's more I want to say about how they handled this, but I'd rather just include it in a later season. Let's just make this the Michael appreciation section because this man died in season 3 and he never came back. This is not Michael. His character has just completely been watered down even when he gets his memories back. They resurrected the character only to kill him again right in front of us. And they didn't even treat him as a character. We never got a chance to see him reunite with his family, or become a cop again, or struggle to cope with all his memories coming back. Michael wasn't just Jane's love interest, he was his own person. Yes, he loved Jane, but he had a family and friends and a career and even a brother that everyone has forgotten about. But the writers refused to scratch his surface on all that. I'm not saying I wanted this to be the Michael show, I'm just saying that if you're gonna bring my favorite character back to life, bring my favorite character back to life. Oh, and remember how I said that Michael had family and friends? Personally, season 1 and 2 were enjoyable for me as a whole, even when Jane and Michael weren't together, and Rahelia and Michael's relationship had a lot to do with that. They were always really funny in such a wholesome manner, and you can't tell me that this scene doesn't make you smile.
Really? Alright, okay.
Alrighty. Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. Yeah, brilliant.
All right, okay. Okay, here's a guy getting bit by a lizard and then he turns into one. Ready?
Right. Lizard. Stop it. My laughter is gonna bring attention to ourselves.
I was really looking forward to seeing this dynamic again in season 5. Rahelia gave himself the title of Michael's best friend and named his daughter after him, so I was obviously disappointed when we got this. I guess I should talk about this dumb subplot.
What if, when the villain kidnaps the baby, she swaps it out for a different one?
Oh, wow.
Scary, right?
This is done for so many reasons. Firstly, it's on the editor. She reads Jane's book not knowing it's based on real-life events and suggests that she adds in that Rose swapped the babies when she kidnapped Mateo. This is done with the editor's part because the book is basically the show Jane the Virgin, and this is not how the villain works. I'm also looking at the writers, because guess what happens? Jane goes and does a DNA test on her own son. Guys, stop. Why would you even add this subplot in? It ends so anticlimactically, and honestly the way it's even brought up is just so stupid. Rose kidnapped Mateo to make an exchange with Michael. Why do you think Rose has some kind of baby factory where she just has a newborn Hispanic boy ready to swap? So she swaps Mateo, and then, I'll say it again, Rose isn't mean and petty. She does things for a reason. But you know what? Maybe the editor meant that Mateo was swapped with a baby at the hospital. Yes, that's a more plausible suggestion rather than a baby factory, but it still makes no sense. From the daydream that Jane has, it seems as though she thinks another mother got her baby. But again, why? Have you guys watched the show? Have you seen Rose? This swapping of the babies would make sense if Rose had been established as a petty villain who revels in chaos, but she wasn't established that way. The main reasons why I felt the need to talk about this was firstly the fact that this DNA test literally goes nowhere. It ends so anticlimactically. I thought it would at least lead to a big reveal like Rafael isn't Mateo's real father or something like that. Dumb, yes, but at least it did something. And the second reason I felt that I had to talk about this was the daydream Jane has. So just to add some context as to why this bothers me. Mateo was having trouble reading, so they got him tested and he was diagnosed with ADHD. What upsets me is that Jane is imagining what would happen if it turns out Mateo was swapped. I just don't like the fact that Jane would imagine her son this way, as if to suggest that she subconsciously thinks Mateo must have been swapped, because how could her own son turn out this way? It's not explicitly stated, but it just rubs me off the wrong way. This is a bonus section in this video because I just watched this video and now I have something to say. It's a very minor detail, but I feel that Mateo had no growth over the show. Yes, obviously he physically changed, but he was just kind of a brat for the entire series. And I hate that. It's not like by the end, Jane and Rafael find a way to discipline their child and we spend the last season watching him become more well-mannered. I know he grows up to be the narrator, but I feel that we should have seen more of him growing and more of Jane and Rafael becoming good parents. I've seen mischievous children, but the things that Mateo does exceeds mischief and exhibits worrying behavior, and I'd have loved to see him at the very least not being a brat by the end of the series. And there were some things he said and did to Jane that he got no punishment for.
Jane?
I don't want to hear another word.
Jeez, okay.
Go to your room, Mateo.
What's going on?
He ran away from me, across the street with no adult holding his hand, and then he pretended like he didn't know me.
Well, he's had a rough couple of days.
Yes, he has, but even so, he can't run into the street.
I just think we can give him a pass, given the circumstances.
Michael comes back to life, and in episode 3 or thereabouts, he gets his memories back. Jane tells Rafael that she's feeling conflicted, and I'm just going to play this scene.
Even though you still love him.
I don't know.
That feels like an answer. I need you to leave.
Permanently?
I don't know.
And friends, that too felt like an answer.
You should go.
It's the lack of sympathy for me. Yes, it's a sad thing that they have to go through, but Jane's still going through it as well. I've heard too many people rush to Rafael's defense in all this and call Jane out on her selfishness. And we have to stop. Stop attacking Jane because you can't tell me that this isn't a conflicting position that she's in. Are you trying to suggest that this would be an easy decision for you to make if you were in her shoes? So Rafael asks Jane to leave. She leaves, and then what happens? He gets depression. And then when he's asking her to leave, he's already upset. I get that. What I don't like is the fact that Jane didn't actually want to break up. She just needed a moment to think because of the emotional rollercoaster she'd been on. To be honest, I don't think she was asking for too much. And about Rafael's depression, I can't ask TV shows or movies to stop incorporating mental illness into the story. Would it claim to be at least a little bit accurate? Yes, outside factors influence depression, but that isn't the sole reason for it. Because if it were, that would suggest that there is a sole external factor that gives someone depression, and if that's gone, the depression is cured. The show and the characters in it, namely Petra, make it seem as though Jane caused Rafael's depression, and even when she chooses Rafael and they get back together, we never hear about this depression again, as if she's the one who cured it. Secondly, I hate that Rafael having depression was introduced before Jane chose Rafael. So when he says this
whole trip I've been trying to imagine a life with you. But every time I did, I felt guilty about Rafael. And then I suddenly realized it's not guilt. It's love.
I don't believe her. If you have a friend who's going through something like depression, you'll want to be there for them. And especially because depression and suicide are usually connected in people's heads, you might feel guilty as if you're the one to blame, as is the effect suicide can have on people. You want to give Rafael depression? Fine, go ahead. But what are you doing adding it in before Jane chooses him? Do you not see how problematic that makes this relationship seem? I'm not saying she had to end up with Michael, but it would have been so refreshing to have the story end with a pure-hearted girl picking the relationship that isn't problematic while still being friends with that guy who has issues, teaching viewers that being nice to someone or being there for them is not exclusive to being in a romantic relationship with them. When Jane goes to Raphael and he says he doesn't trust her, or when her son was being a little brat and Raphael defended him, I got so mad because all I could think was, what did Jane do to deserve this? Where's the sympathy for Jane? I'm genuinely looking for it. And it's not just the way the characters disregard what she's going through. It's also the way that the writers undermine the turmoil that their title character is going through. You know this scene? I hate it. Don't misunderstand me. Gina Rodriguez is such a talented actress, but this scene was so out of place. Usually when a character rants in the shows, there are cuts and music, and it's usually a rant about something that isn't that serious. But in the context of the series, I just cringed when I saw this. Imagine Siomar did something like this when she got diagnosed with cancer. There's no consolation from her mother or her grandmother, they're not trying to calm her down, and it seems to be played up for laughs. I feel that Michael's return should have been more emotional for Jane and for Michael. Remember, he's a character too, and not just a prop to move the story along. No offense to Raphael, but come on, he isn't going through that much in comparison. Come to think of it, does anyone else remember when Mateo got diagnosed with ADHD? Remember that emotional reaction? I don't feel that I'm the right person to weigh in on whether this is an appropriate response or whether the show had handled Mateo's ADHD well. I thought it was a pretty dramatic reaction because I know people with ADHD and it doesn't seem like a crippling disorder, but then again, I'm not the expert on this. And even if it is a dramatic response, if that's the direction the show wanted to go with, that's fine. But then when Jane's husband, the man she loved and wanted to grow old with, comes back from the dead, this is the reaction that we get. Okay. Guys, the last episode was really boring, stop lying. But even other than that, do you remember after Jane and Michael got back together in season 2? The build-up to their wedding just had all these cute moments that gave me pure joy in my heart. To be honest, after episode 7, I gave up on rooting for Michael and Jane because it obviously wasn't gonna happen. But shame for the Team Raphael fans because they could have and should have gotten more cute scenes before the wedding like we Team Michael fans got. But they got sex scenes instead of cute heartwarming scenes. Which, now that I think about it, probably wouldn't bother Team Raphael fans that much because, let's be honest, they like Raphael's body, not his personality. But what I don't understand is why the writers added this.
But man, all that baby talk made me think about our future baby and how I can't wait for that. So maybe we could talk about a timeline for adoption?
Well, I've actually also been thinking about that. And I realized that I definitely don't want more kids.
Wow, okay.
So what do we do now?
What do you mean? I told you, there are no deal breakers. We're getting married.
Why though? No, honestly, why? What has this added other than another reason on my list of why the ending of Jane the Virgin was bad? It really seems like the writers were trying to set up for a breakup because they add things in that don't need to be included. Why did they give Raphael depression before Jane picked him? Why did they make him say that he doesn't want kids after he led Jane on to believe that he did? And why did Jane drop the idea of having more kids so swiftly? What is the significance of this?
Kids is one of the most important things that you need to know before you get married. If you're like, I'm 50-50 on having kids, don't be with someone who's 100%. Don't get with someone who has told you they don't want kids with the expectation that you can change them. And don't know that you may not want kids and think, oh, I'm just so in love that I might ultimately end up changing my mind for this person. Because both of those things are sacrifices for a lifestyle that will ultimately lead to resentment no matter how you look at it.
Up until this moment, Jane believed that she and Raphael would get married and have more kids. And now it's not happening anymore. And I personally don't believe that she'll never regret that decision in the future. So when I see this, I don't see it as a happy ending. It just seems like the calm before the storm that is all the fight that they'll probably have in their marriage. Jane the Virgin should have ended at season 2. Logically, it just makes sense. After season 2, she wouldn't be a virgin anymore, so the premise would no longer be there. The first 2 seasons built up to her and Michael ending up together in a fun and interesting way. The story had structure. Rose was a good villain, and honestly, the wedding was so beautiful. Let's contrast the season 2 finale with the season 5 finale. The season 5 finale was boring, and the wedding was so uneventful that I can't even remember what happens. The season 2 finale is full of cute Jane and Michael moments. It has an interesting plot and has my favorite Raphael scene.
Jane? I know this is terrible timing, but it's kind of like what you were saying about your writing. Sometimes you can be really far down the road, but you still have to follow your heart.
What are you talking about?
I love you, Jane. I always have. I always will. And I think we're supposed to be together. So if there's even the smallest part of your heart that believes this to be true, then don't marry Michael. Please don't marry him.
And it was true, friends. He did love her, and he saw she was happy. So how could he ruin that? Which is why he said nothing.
Yeah, I know it's a strange scene to pick, but I think that society romanticizes confessions of feelings so much these days, to the point where it takes away from how considerate it can be to the person these feelings are being confessed to. Because it's her wedding day, why would you tell the bride that you're in love with her? What do you hope to achieve? You're either so arrogant that you believe that this would stop the wedding and that she'll leave her fiancé for you, or you'll just have her feeling guilty for rejecting you. So I actually really like that Raphael didn't confess his feelings here, because I don't think people realize how selfish that can be. So this was a nice moment to see some actual growth in Raphael as he actually did something selfless. And the season 2 finale has a better wedding of the two finales.
Yo, Michael. Te tomo a ti, Jane, como mi esposa. Prometo serte fiel en lo próspero y en lo adverso, en la salud y en la enfermedad.
Jane's dance with her father was so adorable, and Bruno Mars showed up to perform.
To love her for the rest of my life. For the rest of my life.
Do I need to say any more? Even aside from the season finale, season 1 and 2 are far more superior. Even outside the issue of who Jane ends up with, the villain makes sense, the plot twists go somewhere, and the characters are written so much better. I understand I took quite a few controversial stances in this video. Most of it was me writing from a place of hurt. I love this show so much, and it used to hold such a special place in my heart, especially because I watched most of it with one of my closest friends, and it really made our friendship so much stronger. I really loved what the show did with its writing in the first 2 seasons. Like I said, I used to be on Team Raphael, but the writers convinced me to change teams. Me. If you know me personally, then you know how stubborn I am and how amazing it is that someone managed to change my mind. It just hurt to have something I love be destroyed right in front of me. It broke my heart. So here's the one thing that you should take away from this video. There is no season 3, 4, and 5 of Jane the Virgin. It ended in season 2 after Jane and Michael's wedding. This was the ending of the show.
How are you doing today, Jasmine?
But you did this for what?
Why not?
Why?
Why not?
Why though?
Hi everyone, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Did I make this video to hopefully start some chaos? Yes. Am I for the Team Raphael fans? Yes. Have I spent 2 years debating whether I should even make this video? Yes, and it's kept me up at night. I still do feel very strongly about the things I've said, and I will stand by them. But please comment down below because I am interested in seeing what everyone else thought about this show or this video. Team Raphael, Team Michael, or someone who hasn't even watched the show in the first place. I probably made a few mistakes in some of my criticism, and that's partly because I don't want to rewatch any Jane the Virgin episodes, so I apologize for that. Let me know what you think, and maybe I'll see you soon, depending on how further maths goes. Until then, I'm just a squirrel, and thank you for watching.